Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to the Catholic Mama, where you'll learn how to deepen and defend your faith, find comfort as we share the vocation of parenthood, and learn how to raise your children confidently Catholic. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Catholic Mama. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn. Thank you for joining us, not just me today, but us, because lo and behold, look who's back. Hello, husband.
It's the husband again.
It's the husband, Pat Flynn.
Thanks for
the
having
one and
me
the only.
on.
Although it's not the one and the only, because there's another Pat Flynn.
There's a couple
floating.
different Pat Flynns, fake Pat Flynns on the internet, but you're getting the real Pat Flynn.
That is true, because I can see you. And unless this whole universe is some kind of illusion,
You're a solipsist
a la The
now.
Matrix. Then what is that?
A solipsist.
Oh, that's a big word. What is that?
Well, it's just the people who think that they're the only ones that exist, that everything is essentially a projection of the mind. You know, so since you can't get outside your senses, or so they will think, this is the philosophical confusion. For example, how do you know that the world exists outside of your head?
These are heady questions.
Can't. This is the problem of skepticism, folks. We can refute that later in case anybody gets too freaked out. But yeah, that's you're a solipsist if you think that these people exist. I think, what's the old joke of the solipsist? Somebody walks into the professor's office and he's like, yeah, that's right. This isn't solipsist. This is another, not even worth considering philosophical position. He's like, Professor, how do I even know that I exist? The professor looks at him. Who wants to know? It's not that funny. It's kind of a funny philosophy joke. It's amazing how many dumb ideas highly educated people can have, but solipsism is one of them. Actually, Bertrand Russell, famous logician, did a stint in solipsism where he argued that was the only reasonable position. It's like the most unreasonable position you could have.
Did he ever come out of it?
I don't know. He was somebody who kind of hopped around a lot of different philosophical worldviews.
I like newspaper puzzles. The crypto quote is one. For anybody who's unfamiliar, it's just where all the letters are swapped in for other letters, and it's a quote from a famous person. I only know anything really about him, because he's quoted in those things occasionally over the years.
Yeah, so. He was significant for a number of reasons. Symbolic logic. He was a very accomplished mathematician, hostile to religion in a number of ways. Very philosophically confused in a number of ways, as we discussed with solipsism.
Actually, I have
but he was an interesting guy. He's worth reading about.
Well, maybe not now, because I don't want you to go off too far into philosophy. But I'm reading the listeners. Starting to read ever so slowly that Socratic logic book, and they talk about symbolic logic too in there. And I don't know enough of the difference. We can talk about that later.
Yes, okay. We'll put that on hold for another episode.
So Pat went off slightly on a philosophy thought, which is typical. But that is not why we are talking today.
You started it.
What did I say? That wasn't really me. I mean, you went off on syllogism.
Yeah, but you
whatever.
said
I don't
something.
Even, so how do you say it again?
Solipsism.
Solipsism. And then you're a solipsist?
Solipsist.
Okay, boy. Try to say that one more than once. Yeah. No, but that's not why we are joined here together on the couch with our Saint Bernard. And actually, I am not sitting I have a usual spot on the couch, as everybody has their usual spots. I'm not allowed to sit there right now because this big furry baby.
She's so cozy.
She is really cozy. I couldn't move her. So now I'm sitting in a slightly uncomfortable spot on the couch. Just so, look, she's 7. She's 7.5. Oh, look, she's looking at us now.
So beautiful.
She's probably drooling all over my favorite pillow over there too. All right. No, but I wanted you to join me again. And in case you forgot from 5 minutes ago when I was talking to you about this, I was recording a podcast the other day with a guest that I'm excited to share with everybody. That'll be probably in the next week or so. And I realized as I was talking to her, it's been a year since this whole conversion experience began. Yours, of course, we've talked about this in other episodes. Yours was different than mine, but it really started around this time of year when you wore me down. Because we were taking a turn walking around the inside track of the Y without the kids. You're welcome. And you said, yeah, I feel like we should just give it a try. And I said, nah, you told me to have an open mind. And I said, I do have an open mind, but it's already made up. And I'm not a Christian. And I sure as hell won't be a Catholic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember it. You said it. I was just reflecting on that on one of my own podcasts.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Ha, ha, ha.
How adamant you were of not becoming Catholic.
I know. I'm sure the Holy Spirit's getting a good laugh out of that one.
He's having a holy chuckle.
Yeah. Holy chuckle.
He's having a real holy chuckle.
So it's been about a year that I sat down at work when I was not doing work and started looking up churches in the area. And as you know, we started with a Lutheran one, but it's around this time of year. So it's been about a year now that this whole thing started in earnest. Cause you were doing research beforehand.
Oh yeah. It was a long time in the making.
Yeah. But the
official, I would say, conversion process.
We actually did something public about it. Mm-hmm. Right. Cause it's, you can sit in your house and read books in the dark where nobody else can see you and be a closet Christian, which at that point we kind of were. Sort of, you more so than me. And, but then we met with a pastor and did a tour of a church and just said, oh, that's good enough for now. And set on. And then, Chris time a few weeks later, you had a big change. But, so we've talked about our conversion experiences in other podcasts, but now we're a year in. So I have some thoughts about how my life has changed or our lives have changed from becoming Christians.
Yes.
But also I'm sure you do as well.
Yes, many.
Well,
they're private.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the end of the podcast, folks. Thanks for listening.
No, I have a lot. I was just talking about this on my own episode with Rachel Fulton Brown because she's a professor at the University of Chicago. I was interviewing her because she's a medievalist. And she herself is converting to Catholicism after being an evangelical for a very long time. And a big part of her reason for her conversion process, she's had many factors playing in, is her studies of Mary and Marian devotion. So that was a fascinating story. So I was thinking a little bit about my process as well and how things have changed. And it's simultaneously made life so much easier and so much more difficult at the same time. And all in good ways. The difficulties that have increased have been positive difficulties and positive challenges. And the way that it has made life easier, I go back to answering all of life's biggest, most existential questions. And that, for me, was the biggest piece. Because the fact that those are answered, the rest of the difficulties I can deal with. But before, when those questions weren't answered, and they're five, right? Origin, identity, meaning, morality, and destiny. Those five biggest questions that every human being wants and needs to know the answer to. It's kind of the God hold on you. Until you have these questions answered, you're just never going to feel like you're always going to feel like something is missing deep down existentially. That is gone for me. I feel like all of these questions have been answered in an incredibly satisfactory way. It doesn't mean I know everything about everything. That's why you need God and eventually need to meet God. And you won't be able to answer every detail of every question in a lifetime. That's impossible. But the biggest things, those five big questions have been, and I would argue that only Christianity can answer those five questions both adequately and satisfactorily. I'll be careful with my words. Especially once we get over 3 syllables, it starts getting a little shaky. So that has made life easier and way better. And we can talk about all those individually if we want. Difficulties have certainly increased. It has challenged me morally in a sense that there was many things that both of us had to change of our lives. Turns out, was living in sin. What do you know?
Everybody's living in sin.
Yeah, all sinners, right? But there's definitely things about our lives. I'm getting into details if we feel it's appropriate. Of things that I did not want to change. I didn't like the church teaching on, and then you study, you read, You learn and you realize that the church is right. I need to make these changes. So it's challenge. And every time it's been for the better. And every time after I do it, I realize, wow, that really was worth it. I'm better because of this. I feel better. I am better. I really kind of see it as like, the analogy of the alcoholic, right? You're kind of so habitual in certain sins, just like somebody in their drinking habit, that they're convinced that there's nothing wrong, that they're fine. Everything's fine, right? Sin works a lot of the same ways. Even the smaller sins, the venial sins, work in the same way. So you really got it. This is where the church is so helpful. It's a kind of a guideline. Like here's objectively what's really good for you. Here's objectively what you need to be doing, and just trust in God in that. And trust He'll give you the grace to help you get it done. So it's challenging, but God helps you do it, which is the great thing. And of course, there's also the greater challenge of everything we're doing now. Is like we have this wonderful, beautiful, great, good thing, and there's a whole bunch of people out there who don't know it, who need to be reminded of it, who are in it but don't seem to fully understand it. So it's that whole mission of evangelization, which is not necessarily an easy project, but is a very rewarding project. So those are some just initial thoughts.
Okay.
You?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I'm more of an obedient person anyway. I like authority. I have not had one, now that I've knew the reason for any Catholic teaching, and it wasn't like this sick patriarchy that's just trying to keep people down and, yeah, right. So all that nonsense. Now that as soon as I realized that, I have not had one problem with any Catholic teaching.
Yeah, there's not a single.
Well, I know you said some were difficult for you. None of this has been. It's actually, I'm relieved because it took away a lot of things that I did but didn't really want it. I don't know. It just it made it easier for me because I do like authority. Mm-hmm. Even though I tell you constantly, don't tell me what to do.
That's right. Yeah, it's funny how it works.
Isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, you're not. The whole Catholic Church has been around for 2,000 years. Yeah, but so I like authority. So I haven't had this. It felt like an easy alignment for me. Mm-hmm. It was almost as if my heart hardened over the years, and I don't know when that would have happened. I have a feeling it was just over time when I just realized that nobody else can help me in the same way that I think that they should. I'll just do it myself. So I just kind of closed off a lot of areas and a lot of people to the point where, shortly after we converted, we had a family issue that we had to take care of. And if it had not been for that conversion, I would have just,
I don't think we would have done it. I don't think we.
I wouldn't. I would have just said, well, that's their problem.
Yes.
And instead we got eyeball deep and potentially save somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, so, no, I fully, we got to give that one to God 100%. Yeah. I mean, I just do not think that what happened, which was a very good thing in the end, it would have happened that way if the timing wasn't.
No, because my heart was hard at that point before that. And I would have been like, you know what, that's their issue. Mm-hmm. They got themselves into this mess. They got to get themselves out. And if they don't, well, bye,
Yeah. No, I know, because some people will say, are you saying I can't be a good person without religion? No, I've never said that. I know a lot of, good people. I don't think there's any such thing as good or bad to begin with. If you think, God doesn't exist, that's a different question. But I know I am a better person with religion, and no doubt there. And it's got to be an apples to oranges thing. You never, necessarily know what you were. And I don't think I was a bad person before, but if there's anything that it has been made known to me, is I had a lot of opportunities, let's call them, for improvement. And the whole thing with morality is the way to understand it. It's not some arbitrary set of rules. It's not some oppressive regime, meta-narrative power grab by this ever-elusive patriarchy that's so subtly effective and efficient that nobody can even define what it is. It's not that stupid thing. What it is morality is a blueprint for living well. It comes from God, who is the absolute paradigm of moral goodness, being the center of oughtness. He made us, and he made us a certain way. And there's certain things that we should want that are good for us, that will cause us to flourish. The problem is our will isn't always aligned with that. And so there's often a process of suffering. Suffering has to do a lot with giving up something that you want or wanted but can't get. And to realign our will with what is really good for us often involves suffering. But we have to trust in God and realize that He knows what is really good for us. Of course He does, way more than we do. And just because we want something doesn't mean it's good. So I think that's the better way to think about it. And this has been reaffirmed to me time and again, where at first I went to make these changes. I didn't necessarily want to. Then once I did, once I habituated them, I see, oh no, this really was good for me. So.
Yeah. I think for me, again, because maybe my heart was a little harder over the years. Once I learned the Catholic teachings on things, and once I just got to know Jesus more, it was almost like I was given, I could finally give myself permission to stop acting in the way that I was. And again, you know, converts or whatever, you don't want to have a, who was the bigger sinner match against one another. Like, oh man, I was so terrible before I was saved or whatever it was. I wasn't a terrible person. I know that. No. But man, I didn't realize how much needed to work to get done, work needed to get done. But at the same time, it's not that I'm staying up at night fretting over all these things that I've done in my past and feeling guilty about anything. It's actually quite freeing. I felt so much more secure and freer now, realizing that I'm weak and I need a lot of help. And the only person who can provide that help ultimately is God.
It's a freedom for excellence principle. Is your highest freedom as a human being is in pursuing that which is really good for you. Your highest freedom is in God. God makes us more free, not less free. Now, this is the trapping that I think a lot of atheist type of people fall into. This is something that I fell into for many years when I would have considered myself to be an atheist, was that the whole idea of God just seemed like a restriction to freedom. Doesn't want me to have a good time, doesn't want me to live life the way that I want to live it. And that's really the wrong-headed way to think about it. We achieve our greatest flourishing, our highest freedom, when we come into alignment of what is really good for us. Now, God is the highest good. There's many other goods along the way, but God is the highest good. So it's in God that we become more free. It's in sin that we really become bounded up, restricted, a slave of the passions, if you will. So yeah,
there might have been something to those WWJD bracelets. This blueprint. What would Jesus do?
I brought that up to somebody the other day who was around my age, and they've never heard of those, or never remember those. I also brought up to my Sunday school kids and asked them if they ever heard of it, and they said no. So I wonder if it was just...
Where was that person? Where did they grow up?
East Coast.
Northeast? That could have been the difference.
Maybe. It was big in the Midwest.
And big in the South. So actually, Pat and I have talked about this. He was born in the Philly area, but grew up in the Midwest, and I grew up in the South. And we've noticed down to the grocery store chains, there's a lot of similarities between the Midwest and the South. So it could have been that.
It very well could have been. Yeah, I remember everybody had one of those WWJD bracelets.
And then the Livestrong bracelets trumped those, I think.
Was that it?
I think they came after that.
Yeah.
But it is true. It's become this blueprint. So it's simplified. It's simplified everything. I know now what is right and wrong very clearly. It doesn't mean that but it's on some of it isn't easy. I still have to figure out what is the most loving thing I can possibly do. And that it gets especially hard, when we talk about the beautiful, the good, and the true in evangelizing the faith, that truth is a difficult one, especially with loved ones. And I just ran into that last night with a family member.
That's right.
And it's hard. It's hard, but at least now I know that if I am speaking truth, if I am spreading goodness and sharing beauty with others, then I can't be all wrong.
Well, yeah, it's one of those things where, becoming a Christian, taught me a whole new definition of love, which is the highest love, the Christian love, agape, to will the good of the other. It's the kind of love that will allow somebody to suffer if it's good for them. You think of like an example of this I was listening to from Eleanor Stump, who is a very good philosopher and Catholic thinker, said that, old medical advice back in her day when she was raising her kids, that if a child had a fever, you ran them under cold water. And, you know, whether that advice is sound or not is irrelevant. The point is that she did this to her baby. Baby was screaming and yelling. It was the most painful thing that she ever had to do as a mother, but she was doing it because she loved the baby and wanted to make sure it was really good for her. Now, at some point she gave up and said, I just can't do this anymore. And the father stepped in. He's like, I'm going to do it. And then she said, who was more loving in that instance? You know? So you got to realize that's, you know, that's God. You know, C.S. Lewis has a famous example of a dentist. He's like, you want a loving father? You got one. But that might not always involve getting everything you want, but you will get everything you need. And I think that people need to realize that answers so many important questions, but also it reflects back for how we should treat other people too. Are we just being patronizing? Are we just trying to get along with people all the time? Or are we really trying to love them and really trying to will what is good for them? And like you said, sometimes this might mean sharing hard, difficult truths. Now, should we always try and do it in the most effective way? Should we ever be intentionally offensive? No, we're not saying that at all. But if somebody's doing something that's really bad for them, you have an obligation, a moral obligation to intervene, to try and help this person.
It is an act of mercy.
And they might well be incredibly offended. This goes right back to the example we were talking about with my family member. Was not well received. Let's just say that. Many words used. It would be inappropriate for a family podcast. But we love this person. And because of that, the love, it abounded all the more. Like everything strengthened, the relationship strengthened. Very difficult to do at first. It was giving that baby a very cold bath. But, you know, so that has been an incredibly important.
I'm going to say admonishment is an act of mercy. Mm-hmm. So that can't be overlooked. It's a difficult one to deliver in a just and loving way all the time, a merciful way, but it is an act of mercy. We can't forget that.
Yeah. So
which we haven't, because we keep doing this. You know, all the opportunities, because you know, especially when it comes to Catholic faith, our families, both of ours, are nominally Catholic or fallen away.
Or actively heretical.
Yeah. So
now, whether you want to use the word heretic with a family member is a matter of prudential judgment. But
I don't remember
if you do have a family member
I may have used that word
heretical, then this is something you need to be concerned about. This is something you need to be concerned about as a Catholic. You need to bring this person back into the church, back into alignment. If they're not in the church, you need to bring them in. This is your duty. This is another thing that alarmed me about Catholics. They did a survey fairly recently. I can't cite it. You're just going to trust me on this. But it's real. I'm not making this up. And that's somewhere, I think, evangelicals, you know, how important do you feel evangelizing is to your faith? And I think it was in the 70%, a lot of them. And they did Catholics, and it was somewhere around like 6 to 7%, abysmally low. Now, this is awful, because Christ commanded us to evangelize. Like, this is a divine commandment. This isn't just some optional if you feel like it thing. We have a moral obligation to bring people into the church. Now, everybody is going to probably go about that in a different way, but we have an obligation to do that. You have to do it. You can't not do it. This is a commandment, folks.
Yeah. So actually, that reminds me, going back to when I had said that I do well with authority. Mm-hmm. And you know this about me too. I have a hard time. I get very nervous, and I try to kind of subvert authority figures. If I don't, what's the way, you know how I am. I just kind of, I try to get out from underneath.
Yeah, weaselly.
Yeah, weaselly. Okay, sure. I don't know if that's a word I would use, but thanks. But I have a hard time openly challenging an authority figure's opinion or perspective, mm-hmm. or command or whatever it is. And since becoming Christian, usually what I would do is I would be like, yeah, sure. And then I would go out and go and do my own business and, mm-hmm. and just hope that they didn't notice whatever I was doing. And this could go for parents or bosses or whatever. but since becoming Christian, and actually one of our priests had said this to me, that what do I have to fear? I have God. There's nothing left to fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that when I go to evangelize in tricky situations, that what do I have to fear?
Mm-hmm.
And I can ask the Holy Spirit to help guide my words and make sure that the message is being received well as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying what needs to happen to really, make those unlocks happen. But I've noticed incrementally less and less fear of going against or maybe hurting somebody's feelings or I don't know. I usually would just be a yes, but yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
And wouldn't speak the truth. And I was scared to do that. Now I actually have a truth to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just some subjective truth that I just feel a certain way, that now I have an objective truth and a divine commandment to go forth with this truth.
Mm-hmm.
And now knowing that, what do I have to fear? I have God. It's changed my abilities, my confidence in myself to be an evangelizer, or just a member of the human race.
Yes.
My confidence has gone up.
Good. Confidence is good. And I think, to everybody listening, don't feel you have to be the world's most rigorous apologist to be an effective evangelist. I mean, just ask somebody, maybe even a close friend, if they just want to go to mass with you sometime. A lot of people just, you'd be amazed at how many people are just waiting for an invite. That's it. They don't need to be argued with necessarily. They just want to be asked to be included. So find those opportunities. If you have church events, just ask people to come along. Don't need to be, super pushy about it. You just plant the seeds, expose people. There's 1,000,001 different ways that you can evangelize. And I'm not going to say that any one way is better or right in every instance. I don't believe that, but we all have an obligation to do whatever we feel we can in terms of bringing the good news forward and getting people to come into the church. And it makes me sad that Catholics, for whatever reason, feel, and look, we all know it. We all know it. Catholics, you go into church, like how many of them are like leaving the church and going and spreading the gospel? They're rushing out of the parking lot, hitting each other. So we know it's a problem. So we have to fix it. And the fact that, look at this, the fact that the Catholic Church, still, have these, who was I talking to the other day where, it's going to totally escape my mind, where people were still signing up for RCIA. The fact that people, amidst all the scandal, amongst how little Catholics feel that evangelization is important, the fact that all these people are still coming into the church is just proof, ultimate proof of just how, who's really in charge of the church, right? But that means that we still have this role to play. We have to get out there. We have to evangelize. How you want to do it, be creative with it, whatever you think is going to be effective or efficient, but you got to make the effort. You got to go out and do it. This isn't some like, if you have the time, like this is a commandment. This is a serious thing.
That reminds me, years ago, I met an Irishman who, when pressed to know where in Ireland he was from, he reluctantly told me that it was Belfast. And you could tell there was shame almost that he was from Northern Ireland with its history of violence and maybe the stigma that this person perceives that the whole world has about Northern Ireland. We don't want Catholics to feel like that just because the Catholic Church has been mired in these really terrible controversies and scandals and whatnot. That you don't want to just, when pressed, admit that you're Catholic.
Yeah, and that's, I was talking with Rachel about this on the podcast. It's like, look, corruption has been with the church from the very beginning, right? You don't abandon Jesus for the sins of Judas, right? If the New Testament taught us anything, it's like, right, where do we put our faith? Really? Who's really in charge of the church? So we shouldn't be surprised at corruption. It's always been there, but we shouldn't tolerate it either. I said this on a podcast. I love the church. But the church is like Noah's Ark, right? This is the way to salvation. That's what Noah's Ark was. But you know what else was about Noah's Ark? A bunch of filthy animals were on board. It smelled. It probably stank, so on and so forth. This is borrowing this analogy from Patrick Madrid. But guess what? Anybody who was on that ark, like looking back, like if you could have chosen to be on that ark or not been on it, you would have been on that ark. That's the Catholic Church right now. Yes, there's a lot of nasty, weird, disgusting, totally abhorrent stuff that goes on. There always has been. There's like, if the devil has a primary target, it's the most good and holy thing there is. That's the Catholic Church. So we shouldn't be surprised that these things happen. We have to be able to separate them out. That the church, again, and just for anybody listening, always be clear, especially when you talk to people, like the church is not a hotel for saints. It's a hospital for sinners. That's why we have the church. We're all sinners. That's the beauty of the Catholic position. It starts from that position. We all need God's help. All of us, all the way through, up to the Pope. Nobody's exempt from that. So that it's helpful to be able to explain that to people and realize, because so many people will get held up of the objections of, well, what about the corruption or this or that? But you have to be able to pull these things apart and realize that the church in its very nature be corrupt. It's guided by the principle and the power of the Holy Spirit, right? Now, people in the church can be corrupt. They have been, certainly. People in the church can also be saints, incredibly holy people. So it's just important to be able to make those distinctions. I have to say, all the number of holdups that I had over the Catholic Church going in, that was never really one of them. For some reason, I was always able to make that even before I was, don't want to use the word sold on Catholicism, but it seems inappropriate. But even before that happened, that was certainly none of the objections. I definitely never thought that just because bad people were part of an institution, therefore that institution is false or wrong or whatever. And it's funny because nobody ever really makes that argument for anything else. Nobody ever sees like all the corruption that goes on in public schools and like, let's get rid of public education, or all the bad molester teachers, which there's a ton. Let's get rid of public education all entire, or democracy, right? Oh, look at all the corrupt people. Let's get rid of democracy. So if you don't think that, it applies to these things, you definitely should think it applies to God's church.
Kind of tying it back into your personal experience over the last year, in recognizing that the church is a hospital for sinners, and the freedom that there is in acknowledging the fact that we're all sinners. Was that an easy thing for you to acknowledge that you're a sinner?
Yes, because it's
even using that word.
Yeah, I had to get used to the word. The word was because I was modernized like a lot of people. So I definitely believed it and felt it, but then just the word always had that stigma because it's been so caricatured, I
got to tell you, growing up in the Bible Belt, that using that word sinner, that was difficult for me because it sounded like the Bible thumpers that would throw the Bibles in my window as I drove away from school. I had a hard time with that. But go ahead.
Yeah,
it's not about me right now. It's about you.
Do an episode on that. Definitely. It was an adjustment process, but it always made sense for me because the study of morality was something that really brought me to the church. And you see that there really is a such thing as a truly right and truly wrong in the world. Objective moral values and duties exist, but at the same time, there's something really wrong with the human race. Something really, really wrong with the human race. And there seems to be only one, again, good, great thing that it helps to explain that helps to explain the foundation for moral values and duties. Some things are truly right, other things are truly wrong. And yet human beings seem to mess up all the time. So we know this moral law. It's on our hearts, right? Yet we always seem to fall short of it. It's just this very ironic, if you can call it ironic and not sick, condition, right? And we always rationalize it. And we always think, well, I know I should be doing this, but. So we have this very basic intuition of the moral law, yet we always seem to fall short. Christianity is what makes sense of that perfectly. Nothing else can even come close to making sense of these basic truths. So it made sense to me. It always made sense to me. But yes, using the word, it was very easy for me to accept intellectually, and then even spiritually. I mean, I remember like when I was a kid, when I first started doing sins, I did feel that these things were wrong, and then it's exposure therapy. You get used to them, and then you kind of become desensitized, and And this is what the church teaches. Like, that's why you got to be careful about venial sins. You become desensitized, they cascade, and then next thing you know, you might be in mortal sin. So it brought me back, in a really profound way, where I was able to realize, like, oh yeah, and then I was starting to pull myself out of it by the grace of God, and fix a lot of it. So easy for me to accept, very freeing, like you talked about, challenging. God helps, and then the word sin took a little bit of practice just to get using that again. I know what you mean there. So now, easy to accept, but yeah, that word has just been so misused and caricatured that it was. But that's been a lot of the process for me.
Well, I don't know if you have any final thoughts. I've got a couple, but we'll start if you want to go.
Let me hear yours. It might give me some inspiration.
Okay. Well, one, and I touched on it before. Over the years, I had an idea of myself I would become when I was a teen and then in my early 20s, and those things didn't necessarily happen. And my feelings of self-worth, and this also corresponded to, going from believing in God. It was just some like non-denominational God that I believed in all those years anyway, if I did. And then it went from God to, I don't know if he's there, to he's not there, and maybe we are just pawns in a video game, this cosmic video game. I don't know. My confidence and feeling of self-esteem and self-worth really plummeted. And I remember we talked about this, I think, before, but I think I was crying. It could have been pregnancy hormones or something, but I just remember saying, like, I don't feel special. Mm-hmm. And you said, well, of course you are. And I think I said, it was like, but why would you even say that? What is there to even out in the universe for you to say anything like that? And there's a quote or something, you are something about, remember how amazing you are because you're made of the same stuff as stardust, because we have the same, elements or whatever that stars have.
Yeah. And like, it sounds nice, but what a dumb quote.
It does sound like, what does that mean? Okay, great. That's wonderful. That's in cold, empty space.
Yeah.
I have some.
To dust I came, from dust I will return. Yeah, what kind of dust? What does it matter what kind of dust it is?
I know. Stardust or dust. So that sadness just kind of pervaded a lot of my life. And I think that also is when I just became a more negative person. Mm-hmm. And I definitely was not always like that, but that change to atheism for me personally really got me stuck down in a self-deprecating, mm-hmm. overly self-deprecating mm-hmm. mindset. Mm-hmm. Having this relationship now with God has been amazing. Knowing that I was made for a certain purpose, that there are certain vocations that I'm fulfilling at this point in my life, mm-hmm. that it's important because this is the domestic church. So as some days may seem very small, that I just make it through with maybe folding a couple pieces of laundry and making sure everybody's fed, but everybody knows that they're loved, and like that became so much more important. And suddenly
leading souls to God. It's the most important job.
But suddenly it didn't matter that I didn't do, I didn't go on to get this degree. I didn't go on to travel the world in this way. And now all these things would have been great, and I still wouldn't mind doing them. But my self-worth isn't tied into these achievements that I did or did not do. So my feelings of self-worth and confidence and just general levels of contentedness mm-hmm. have really gone up.
Yeah.
And I'm more at peace now and definitely more faithful. And I thoroughly enjoy it. Prayer has become an ongoing thing throughout the day. And I enjoy it. I have somebody to talk to, even when you're not around, my love. Even when you're not around and the kids are driving me crazy, mm-hmm. I don't have to try to. And how many times as a mom I've said, I cannot do this anymore. This has got to stop. Instead of saying and just really thinking that, oh my God, I'm totally on my own. Everybody's driving me insane. I'm not going to get any alone time. I can't even go in the bathroom without little fingers prying their way underneath the door. I can say, God, I can't do this alone. I need you. I need you. Please help me. Man, the days have just gotten so much better. And the days, you hear this, like the days are long, the years are short in raising kids. Mm-hmm. Since becoming Christians, the days don't feel unbearably long. Mm-hmm. It's, and even we've had some tough times with our kids have been driving us crazy lately in some of their behavior. But even that, it doesn't feel like I'm like just trying to punch the clock until their bedtime so I can be free of that obligation, at least for a little while. It all feels good.
Yeah.
So that's my ending thought.
I like it. I don't know if I want to try and top it.
You don't have to, but go ahead if you'd like.
Well, I'll affirm it. There was a lot of things in my life that before this conversion, I was just not, the passion had run out for a lot of, especially in my business, and because I had just chased, like you said, kind of achievement after achievement, and to give myself credit, got a lot of them. But you realize that, it brings you back to the Augustine thing. Our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. I was trying to find whatever that was that would fill that lack in me. Is it business success? Is it getting published? Is it having a really fancy, cool car? Check. None of those things. And I wish, and at this time I was, studying people like Aquinas and really started to shift me the way that I thought about things, more towards the transcendent, if you will. So now it's not like I don't care about those things, but I care about them for a different reason. And the different reason has infused those things with so much more passion and so much more on fire about them. And obviously the faith component has become a huge part of my business now. And it's just brought such life and excitement to everything else that it never had before. Even when I was most excited about those things before, it pales into utter significance to how I feel about it now, in light of the grand purpose, and how rewarding that is intrinsically to me to be able to share this with people. For people who aren't familiar with me, I'm mostly in the fitness and business world. So people are coming to me from all different kinds of perspectives. Some Christian, number not. A lot of kind of people who are spiritual but not religious at all. You name it. So I have a very significant and interesting opportunity where I'm able to propose a lot of these religious and Catholic ideas to people who aren't Catholic. And hopefully, I think I'm able to make a bit of a difference that way. And that's just made everything so much more important and rewarding. I mean, outside of the domestic church, which is domestic church, I'm sitting here looking at Lola right now. She's going to be joining us with the Marian consecration here in a minute. She's so beautiful.
She's very warm.
She's very warm. She's part of the domestic church. And you're right. There's, the grand purpose, the teleology, the reason, that we're here is to know, reason, and love God, to know and love God, and to help others know and love God, and to bring souls into the world to know and love God. Nothing could be more important than that. Nothing in the world could be more important than that. Now, that's a big job. It's a big job. It's an important job. It's the job. But it's once you recognize that, once you get that, again, perhaps an adjustment process. Once you get your will in line is not the easiest. It's like sometimes like going to the dentist. If you got to drill a tooth, that's what's good for you, then so be it. That's what it is. You wanted a loving God, you got one. And I think I'll just we'll leave it at that. It's been a wild year.
It's been a heck of a year. It's good. We've been together for, I don't know, what year is it? 7-8 years. Every year has been, the first year I think was pretty easy. Isn't that cute? The first year was easy. And then every year since then, like, whoa, how did we get through this? Oh my God. We list of things that happen. And this has been the most rewarding year.
Best, easily, by far, the best year. We got married in the church. That's right. I got baptized. You got confirmed, married in the church. God willing, I'll be confirmed at Pentecost, but that'll be 2019. So we got that to look forward to. But in the meantime, for any of the listeners that don't know this already and want to follow along a little bit more of the day-to-day of our little lives here, you can find me, the Catholic Mama, on Instagram. So come on over, say hi. You see pictures of Lola, the St. Bernard, every once in a while. Which is, if you don't know St. Bernards personally, they are both disgusting and beautiful at the same time.
Beautiful face, beautiful fur, great tail, the best tail. Drool. The drool alone is...
It's worth it.
Yes, sure. That's what Pat says. It is worth it. All right, yeah. You can find me over on Instagram, The Catholic Mama, MAMA, just like the podcast. And I hope to see you there. Thank you, husband.
Thank you, wife.
Now we're off to pray the rosary together, because a family that prays together stays together, as I can't think of his name, but it was a Catholic priest.
I
forget too. It is
the truth.
Yes.
Statistically.
Yes, statistically it is true. This isn't just some idle thought. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us, and see you on Instagram, or check back in here next time for the next episode. Take care. Don't forget to head over to thecatholicmama.com to get your free copy of How to Talk to Your Kids About God. This handy little ebook will teach you how to broach the topic of God with your children, or how to respond to your kids when they want to talk about God, as well as give you answers to 7 of the trickiest questions about the faith that Christian parents face. You'll love the easy-to-understand grown-up answers, the pared-down but not talked-down answers you can share with your kids, plus recommended resources if you'd like to deepen your understanding of the topic. Get yours free at thecatholicmama.com.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.